Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to welcome you all here and call the meeting for the Board of Water Resources to order. They keep telling me they gave me this gavel, but I never use it. So we'll make it official and tap the gavel and begin the meeting. My name is Kyle Stevens. I'm chairman of the board this year. We welcome those that are here from staff and also those that are visiting and will be participating with us later in project presentations. Just note for the record that today is Thursday, May 5th, 2022, and it's a little bit after 1 o'clock. And we'll go ahead and introduce members of the board, and I'll just ask them to introduce themselves. And we'll begin with Mr. Holmgren.
Good afternoon. I'm Charles Holmgren. I represent the Bear River Basin, Box Elder, Cache, and Rich counties.
I'm Wayne Anderson. I represent Wasatch, Utah, and Juab counties.
Norman Johnson. I represent Southeast Utah area, San Juan, Grand Emery, and Carbon counties. I'm from Blanding.
Blaine Ibsen, represent the Sevier River system.
Juliet Tennert, Salt Lake and Tooele.
And we have two individuals visiting or participating with us today virtually, Randy and Jim. If you would go ahead and introduce yourselves.
This is Randy Crozier. I represent Uintah, Duchesne, and Daggett counties.
Jim Lemon, representing the 5 Southwest counties.
And again, my name is Kyle Stevens, and I represent the Weber River Basin area of Davis, Weber, Summit, and Morgan counties. So again, thank you to board members for being here. And just we'll mention for those that are participating with us remotely, if you will mute your mics and turn those on when you need to speak or want to add comment to the discussions that will take place today. I'll ask Candace Hossenjager, the director of the Division of Water Resources, to go ahead and introduce staff that are here and participating today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With us today is Joel Williams, Shalane DiBernardi, Todd Stonley, Tom Cox, Stephen Gregerson, Josh Zimmerman, Eric Dixon. We also have Shannon Cloud taking minutes for us, and Paul Gedge and Carmen are in the back and making all the AV possible for us. And then Randy Staker is helping as well. So thanks for all of your guys' efforts.
Thank you. With those introductions, we'll go ahead and go through our agenda items. And the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our March board meeting that was held down in St. George. If there's someone would like to, if there's discussion or ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make, this is Blaine Ibsen, I'd like to make a motion we approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
This is Norman. I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. We did have some discussion in our earlier briefing meeting and called to the attention of a few corrections, but those have been noted, not anything substantive. And so I'll go ahead and call for the question on approval of the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Say nay. Okay, I'll rule that that motion passes, and thank you for the minutes. Thank you to staff for the detail and time and effort that you put into making sure that our minutes of our meetings are correct, and so that we can make sure that we're complying with all of the requirements. So with the next item on the agenda, that is the Nrcs water supply and drought report. This is Jordan Clayton. We'd like to welcome him to the mic and look forward to your presentation. We have had a little bit of moisture, but let us know where we're at.
Push this. How about that?
There you go.
Okay. Thank you very much for the time to present this afternoon, I should say. Appreciate the time and good afternoon. Again, my name is Jordan Clayton. I'm with the Nrcs, and I'm going to provide an update about our snowpack and water supply. And similar to the meeting in St. George, I unfortunately don't have a lot of great news, but I'll try to provide as much information as we have right now. I'll start with the current conditions at our SNOTEL sites, our snowpack measurement sites across the state. And you can see those are shown on this map by the small circles throughout the state. They're colored by what percent of normal they are right now. This was taken this morning. And they also, you can see visible are the major basins across the state and what percent normal those basins are as well. With the exception of the Bear Basin in the northern portion of the state, you can see the majority of the state is below normal for this time of year from a snowpack perspective. I would caution that as we get into lower and lower portions of our snowpack, as we get towards lower and lower normals for this time of year, these percent of normal numbers become a little bit more meaningless. So when we're comparing against a normal that's close to 1 inch or 2 inches or something, the percentages tend to blow up in either direction. So they're not quite as meaningful as they were a few weeks ago, but I still do think they're instructive. So I wanted to include them for today's presentation. Also shown here is the trend over time for how our snowpack is done this winter. The current water year is shown with that black line. The way to compare this, as I've mentioned in previous meetings, is to look at the green line, which would be a normal snowpack. And you can see the current snowpack is well below that line. It's trended well below that line really since about the second week of January. Or late January, and unfortunately, that excellent precipitation that we did receive in December and October, which did boost our precipitation totals, did not lead to the snowpack totals that we were hoping for this year because the precipitation really turned off during the months of January and February. And we've done okay during March and April, a little bit below normal, depending on which basin you look at. Some areas, particularly northern Utah, have done a little bit better. The Bear and the Weber are above normal for the month of April. But from a statewide perspective, we're still unfortunately below normal for our SWE. I also plotted on this graph last year. You can see that with the purple line, and it's pretty disappointing to be when we got to our peak, and since then to be hovering very close to last year's snowpack totals. Okay, I was mentioning precipitation. These are the major basins again. Also shown again are the SNOTEL sites. The same coloring scheme, a lot more green on this map. We're close to normal for precipitation across the state with the exception of the southern Wasatch Front and portions of the southern spine of mountains and the westward facing portions of those. But really predominant pattern here is close to normal for the annual water year. Again, most of that comes because of the huge boost that we had during October and December. We've done pretty well, as I mentioned, in northern Utah over the last month and a half. And that's how the Bear got back up to 100%. But by and large, we're trending a little bit below normal, as you can see from the graph in the bottom left, showing the current water year. Soil moisture continues to be positive. This is the same type of graph now showing the current water year for soil moisture across the state. This is a depth averaged value, so it looks at our 2-inch sensor, our 8-inch sensor, and our 20-inch sensor down. Just looking at the mountain locations does not include our scan sites, so this is just our SNOTEL sites. And we're still right about normal, just a little bit above normal, depending on which basin you look at. Some have trended a little bit below by now, but that's okay. We're feeling pretty good about the soil moisture levels in the mountains, and that's going to promote a better efficiency of our runoff than we experienced last spring. Last spring, we lost a really large percentage of our snow water to headwater locations and replenishing that sponge, if you will. And we're expecting a better return on our snowpack investment this year. We're already starting to see that. These are graphs borrowed from the U.S. Geological Survey that I wanted to show for current context. I wanted to focus first on the two maps on the right. This shows the monthly total stream flow for the basins in Utah for last year on the top right and this year on the bottom right. And you can see the improvement across many portions of the state from a stream flow perspective. We've definitely felt the impacts of that better soil moisture. Even for around the same amount of snowpack, we're seeing it show up in our streams more than we did last year. So I think that's pretty instructive. From a statewide hydrograph perspective, when we lump all of our streams together, that's what we get in the bottom left there. Again, the current water year is shown with the black line. And you can see we're starting to trend into around the 20th percentile. We're still below normal, but we're not as dire as we were last year at this time. If you move your eye to the left portion of that graph, you can see last year, beginning of May, we were solidly in the bottom 10th percentile. We just issued this yesterday. This is our Streamflow forecast for April through July based on the May 1 forecast. So it does include all the flow that we've already received for the month of April. And it forecasts forward the total volume that we'll receive from that beginning of April to the end of July period as a volume. And of course, it's colored by the same coloring scheme where red is below 50% of normal. Most of the state in the southwestern portion is looking at forecasts that are below 50% of normal runoff. Most of the rest of the state is between 50 and 90% of normal runoff that's anticipated at this point. I would mention our partners at the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center have a similar forecasting regime, of course, and their predictions are pretty close to these. I don't want to speak for that agency per se, but I do want to mention that we do reach out to the CBRFC when we are working on these forecasts, and it sounds like there's pretty good alignment between that agency and ours for this month. Statewide reservoir levels are shown here. I marked 2022 with the red line. I just plotted this before coming over. We've got 58% of capacity right now in our reservoir system. That's down 10% from this time last year. The closest previous year that we can compare to is that 2016 line, which is the green line. And we're starting to trend a little bit below that line at this point. But by comparison, that is the closest one that we can think of from a management perspective. 2021 is shown by the blue line. You can see we're well below where we were last year from a reservoir perspective. And this is also fresh, hot off the press, if you will. These are the surface water supply indexes for the major basins in Utah. We've hoped that these are instructive. We intend for these to be a really useful measure of how much water is going to be available for those summer months. So this combines the volume of water that we're anticipating for those major basins with what's there right now in those reservoir systems. And then we compare it to the previous 30, 40 years for those basins to get an index. Where the index is in the bottom 20th percentile, it shows as red. And so you can see there's a really large number of the basins in the state that are in the red category. There are several in the state that are very, very low. The Provo and the upper Sevier are both at 2%, the second percentile. Also, Joe's Valley, several others in the state that are very, very low at this point. Upper Sevier and lower Sevier, I should mention. How does that compare to last year? The current surface water supply index percentiles are shown on the left side of this chart. For May 1st, the last year, May 1st, SWASIs, as you will, the surface water supply indexes are shown on the right side, and then you can see the relative change is the final column there. Areas of the state that were improving, we've seen some improvement, are the Uintas, the Virgin, Moab area, and the Little Bear have all significantly improved from last year, and that's positive. I like to try to highlight anything positive that I can say at this point. Unfortunately, the Bear and the Provo and the lower Sevier are significantly degraded from last year from a surface water supply index perspective. We just published our May 1st water supply outlook report yesterday. I'm happy to add people to that distribution list if anyone is concerned about getting those. And of course, we will continue to supply our climate and water reports through the course of the summer, which do include reservoir data and soil moisture information. But this was the last water supply outlook report of the water year. We'll continue to report on those next January. Those are all the comments that I have, and of course, happy to take questions.
Thank you, Jordan. Are there any questions from the board relative to report that Jordan just gave us?
Mr. Chairman, a question for Jordan on the Bear River, where it's dropped as much on the surface water supply index. Is that primarily a reflection of the lower level of Bear Lake?
Correct. Yeah, that's largely driven by a change in storage and not as much in the forecast themselves, because the forecasts are quite similar to last year.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. Appreciate that. I think do we have any comments from the audience?
There was one public comment online.
I know we'd want to make note for the record that there was one public comment received online. Randy, do you want to address that if you would, please? Thank you, Jordan.
Yeah, well, you're fine. We received a comment from Ann Tanner, and her comment reads, with the governor's recent declaration of emergency due to severe drought, what measures are in place to ensure that appropriate budgeting of water is occurring for new housing developments? For example, if a developer buys four single-family home lots and plans to tear those houses down and build a 24-unit apartment building, does the developer need to purchase water rights for the additional water that will be used for the increased number of people that will be living in the new space? If not, why not? How is the doctrine of prior appropriation being carried out when it comes to new developments in the state? If we run out of water, will water be turned off to new developments first before it will be turned off for residents who have earlier priority dates to the water? Or how does the doctrine of prior appropriation work in regards to new housing developments? I want to thank you for all of your time and work in helping ensure the water resources in the state are properly looked after and safeguarded.
Thank you, Randy, for reading that statement in, and thank you to Ms. Tanner for taking the time and having the interest to address that issue. I don't know that we need to address it or prepared to address it at this point. Candace, if you have any comments to make.
I would say this is a public comment period, so the board doesn't need to respond. We're happy to follow up with Anne and provide her with what information we can, though.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, then we will move to our next agenda item, and that is discussion of committal of funds. Well, the first item is a discussion on committal of funds, and it is RC 023, Consolidated Sevier Bridge Reservoir Company. Blaine, this is in your area, and I think Tom Cox is the project manager. And I believe we have representatives from the company that are also participating with us remotely, and we will introduce them after Blaine and Tom make their presentations. Well, Blaine, go ahead if you have any. Okay, we'll just leave it over. Let Tom go ahead and make it.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the Consolidated Sevier Bridge Reservoir Company owns and operates Sevier Bridge Reservoir and Dam in Juab County. It's more commonly known as Yuba Reservoir. So if you drive down the freeway south of Nephi, you see the Yuba Reservoir sign. That's where it is. You can't see the dam from the freeway. The dam was constructed in the early 1900s and then enlarged to its current capacity of about 236,000 acre feet. It's about 92 feet high, 1,340 feet long. And I mentioned the capacity is it's the largest privately owned reservoir in the state. Back in 2003 and 4, phase one of a dam safety minimum standards upgrade project was completed. It cost about $3.5 million. And that included improvements to the outlet, installation of control gates, and upstream stability issues were taken care of. However, at that time, there wasn't enough dam safety grant money to complete the whole project, so it was broken up into phase two. So phase two is almost ready to go. It will include replacing the new spillway, or the spillway with a new one, new control gates, downstream foundation improvements, constructing a stability berm, and installation of drains. The project, they need funds at this time in order to complete the engineering and make down payments on the control gates for the spillway. It's anticipated that the project will be bid in either the end of June, the first part of July. And we have up before you right now the total project estimated cost, which is out of date. We just got it updated yesterday. It's now about a $27.25 million project. So that's up about $4 million from the last figures that are in the report. Currently, the board has only $17.1 million available in dam safety grant money available. So that's what will be recommended to the board commit today. So if you look at the updated cost estimate of the 27.25 million and the normal 90% grant cost sharing and the 10% loan cost sharing to pay for an upgrade project, we're looking at 24.5 million or so of grant money that will be available for the project. That is not available right now, but because the applicant needs the funds to continue with the project, we're recommending the board commit $17.1 million in dam safety grant. That's 90% of the project cost, and also up to $1.9 million. That's 10% of the project cost in grant money from the C&D fund, or loan money from the C&D fund. Those funds will be returned at 0.1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $127,700 per year. It's ideally, it would be the best option to complete the whole project at this time. In order to do that, we would need to be a little bit creative in the financing. So there are some options, including one that would be to commit extra loan funds to complete the project. And then when the grant funds are available, commit those grant funds at that time to pay down the loan to the 10% of the total project cost. That's just some of the options that are available. Today, we're just asking the board to commit what's the 17.1 million in grant and the 1.9 million in loan. Most of the people involved in the Sevier Bridge Dam just are also involved in the DMAD Dam, which is just downstream of Sevier Bridge. And that project was just, or that dam was just upgraded, and that project was just completed. And so most of the people involved with Sevier Bridge are also be paying back a loan that they received to complete DMAD Dam. So they kind of have a double whammy with paying off two large dam upgrade projects at one time. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that's staff's report.
Thank you, Tom. We'll now turn to the sponsors and invite them to introduce themselves and add anything that you would like to what Mr. Cox has presented on the project, and we'll go from there. So
Go ahead.
sponsors, you go ahead and introduce yourselves.
I'm Andy Nickel. I'm the president of the Consolidated Sevier Bridge Reservoir Company.
I'm Jared Smith. I'm the vice president of that reservoir and also the president of the Delta Canal Company.
I'm Thane Clark. I'm with Bowen Collins and Associates, engineer on the project. And may I just state that the costs have recently gone up on this project, as many of you know, because of the current situation, but also Dam Safety Office has also recommended additional improvements to the project that added to the cost here in the past few weeks. So we're still digging through that. One aspect of the canal company's desire to finish this soon is that currently the reservoir is low and creeping down. And so we see this year as the ideal time to do the improvements because there will be less water in the reservoir, which means less water that the contractor will have to deal with as they excavate the toe of the dam. So there's a great benefit of being able to complete this project this year. Anything else you want to add, Andy?
No, that pretty much sums it up for us. Jared.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and turn to the board then and ask if there's any questions, comments from members of the board relative to this project.
Mr. Chairman, this is Blaine. This is a big project. As Tom mentioned, the companies down there have just barely gone through another big project. They've got a lot on their platter right now. Ideally, as Thane mentioned, they would like to get in and get out and get this done. When bids are open, we'll see where things are at, but the 17.1 million probably is not going to finish the project this year. So hopefully things can be worked out somehow to facilitate getting as much of it done as they can. These folks are serious. They take their safety of their dam seriously. They take their water seriously. I've been very impressed with the management of it. The DMAD reservoir was completed 9 months ahead of schedule and several $1 million under budget. We can only hope maybe this one goes a similar path, but can't count on that. I will mention that I do have stock ownership in each of those companies, and as such, I will need to excuse myself from making any motions or voting on this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ipson. We appreciate those comments. And it is unfortunate that the costs are rising the way they are. And hopefully, it sounds like, Tom, as you have mentioned in the discussion we had in our earlier briefing meeting, that the division has been able to utilize some flexibility to be able to provide funding that will be necessary to be able to accommodate and accomplish what is needed to be done here with this project. So before we go to a motion, we'll ask, were there any public comments made or received relative to this project? Okay, so we'll just let the record show that there were no public comments received on the project. So we're now ready for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, Norman, I'd like to make a motion that the board commit 90% of the current cost up to 17.1 million as a dam safety grant and 10% of the project cost up to 1.9 million as a loan from the C&D fund to be returned at 0.1% interest over 15 years with annual payments of approximately $127,700.
Okay, that's the motion. Is there a second? Second by Wayne Anderson. And because we do have a couple of board members that are participating with us remotely, I don't know if this is in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order, but Randy, did you have a comment that you wanted to make before we went to the motion?
I did just have one comment to share with the board. I would anticipate probably 2 to 3 million of this cost increase that's projected is tied basically to fuel alone, knowing how much construction has to be done. And so if you look at it in that aspect, that's a majority of your cost increase, I would assume.
Okay, thank you for that comment. I apologize for not recognizing you earlier.
No problem.
Okay. We'll go ahead and call for the question on the motion. And so that we can get the votes recorded of those that are participating with us remotely, I'll ask Candace if she will go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Happy to do that, Mr. Chair. Do you want me to do that for all the board members or just the ones virtually?
Let's go ahead and do it for all.
Okay, great. Juliet. Aye. Great. Blaine.
I need to.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yep. Thank you for that clarification. Norm. And Wayne.
Aye.
And Charles.
Aye.
We just got on the record that you abstained again. And Randy.
Aye.
Okay. And Jim Lemon.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll rule that that motion passed with one abstention, with Blaine being recused because of having interest in the reservoir companies that participate there. So thank you, sponsors. Hopefully your costs will not increase too much between now and the time you open bids, but given the history of way things have happened lately, don't know that we can be assured that that won't be the case. But nonetheless, I think the division is committed to, and the board committed to working with you in whatever way we can to assure that funding is available as the project proceeds forward. So thank you.
Thank you for your
Okay.
time.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the next item on the agenda, and that is a special item, agenda item. It is RE 446, Provo River Water Users Reauthorization in Utah County. And again, Tom Cox is the project manager on this project. So Tom, we'll go ahead and let you introduce the special item.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the Provo River Water Users Association operates Deer Creek Dam, which is 80 years old. And being that old, there have become issues with the outlet and the control and things of that nature. So it is time to modify the structure. The association was before the board several months ago for authorization of the project. But at that time, we've had a revision of the cost estimate. So the cost estimate now is $100 million, which is quite a bit larger than the $60 million, which was presented before the board when it was authorized. So we feel it would be appropriate for the board to address that again and reauthorize the project, although the scope really hasn't changed. So the project will include the modification of the intake structure, the rehabilitation of the guard gates, and the installation of a new outlet bypass pipeline. And that is a new item that's been included in the project since it was authorized. There will be anticipated to be another cost estimate presented in August, so those numbers may change. But the association needs funds right now because it has exhausted its current funding supply and needs funds for continued engineering design and the purchase of materials. So if you look at the cost sharing, it's proposed that the Board of Water Resources provide $65 million, and Central Utah Water Conservancy District has an agreement with the association to help with the operation and maintenance of the reservoir, because waters of the Central Utah project passes through the reservoir. The applicant has obtained and basically utilized their $7 million part of the project. So if you look at that, it leaves about $11 million that isn't accounted for. But the association is reaching out to other organizations, the federal government, the state, and other state agencies to cover that $11 million part. So today, staff recommends that the board authorize 65% of the project cost up to $65 million, and the bonded indebtedness be returned at 1% interest over 35 years, with annual payments of approximately $1,620,000 the first 5 years, and about $2,420,000 the remaining 30 years. That includes reserves. And the reason the payments go up is because the association will have paid off some other debt after 5 years. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, that's staff's report.
Thank you, Tom. For the record, I'll go ahead and we have some representatives from the sponsoring entity here, and I'll just read those in. Keith Denos, General Manager. Jeff Budge, Operations and Engineering Manager. Sam Fankhauser, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Engineer with AE2S. Mark Anderson with Zions Public Finance, and Jonathan Ward with Zions Public Finance. So thank you. And looks like Keith, you're the one that indicated that you wanted to address the group, so go ahead.
Is it on?
It is.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
They're really close to it too. That mic
Yeah,
is
you can
quiet.
slide it towards
Okay,
you.
is that better?
That's better.
Thank you. If I could, I appreciate Tom's report. And thank you for having us here today. If I could, I'd like to share my screen so that I can present an update.
If there's any benefit from COVID, one of them has been that it's forced us to become a little bit more proficient in technology.
That's for sure. Thank you. I know that you've seen this before. Some of this Jeff Budge presented to you last June. I'm going to touch on a little bit of what he talked about. You may not remember. We're back to last June, and then give you an update of where we are currently. So we'll go through the need for the project, some of the preliminary study efforts that we undertook, and then we'll talk about the current project and its design. And you already heard about the project funding. The Deer Creek Intake Project serves about half the population of Utah. About 1.5 million people get their water through Deer Creek Outlet Works. That's not all from Deer Creek Reservoir. Some of that is from Jordanelle Reservoir and just regular river water, but it's significant. The south part of the Wasatch Front receives a lot of their water through this system. You all know where it's located, Wasatch County, just below Heber City, up the canyon from Provo. This is an overview of Deer Creek Dam and Reservoir. Particularly on the lower right side, you see the location near the dam and the marina. We'll talk about that later, about the impacts of those areas. Project drivers for this project include the fact that, as Tom mentioned, this is aging infrastructure, over 80 years old. So there's some significant issues associated with that. The guard gates, we'll talk about that in a moment. Aquatic invasive species, particularly the quagga mussel, is a concern. We had a scare a number of years ago, and so the design takes that into account, and this will mitigate and address that. We wanted to mitigate and minimize environmental impacts associated with this project. So one of the things that was very exciting about this is constructing in the wet, not having to draw down the reservoir. And in the middle of a drought, I know that you can all appreciate the fact that we really like this idea of being able to keep the water behind the dam and still accomplish this project. This project will assist us with water quality, both during construction and down the road, because of the design components that allow us, perhaps if we desire, to take water from different elevations to address water quality impacts downstream. Provides us with operations and reliability and redundancy, flexibility down the road as well. And risk management has been the component all the way through. In fact, just yesterday, just this morning, we completed a risk workshop with the Bureau of Reclamation, this project. So it's at its forefront throughout. So we talked about aging infrastructure. I just wanted to give you an insight into what we're looking at. About 7 years ago, we at the Bureau of Reclamation's requirement, we conducted what's called an unbalanced test on our guard gates, meaning full pressure of the reservoir against the upstream side of the gate and no pressure at the downstream side. And it took about 40% more pressure than was allowed under the standard operating procedure to move these gates. That was a very big concern to us, thinking, 80-year-old gates, what happens if they don't perform? What happens if they get stuck closed or stuck open? Either way, it's a bad day for us. So that kind of drove this project as we realized we needed to do something. The problem was we didn't have, you can see in the upper right corner, the old intake before the reservoir was full. There's no way to isolate the intake. It doesn't have stop logs or a bulkhead or anything of that nature, no valve at that end. So it took a lot of thought on how we might accomplish this, address this issue. Some of the things that we did through this, we did some bathymetry to understand what's below the surface, what it all looked like as we're getting ready for construction. I had a really cool video, but I wanted to conserve time, so I won't show the video. We also did some geotechnical assessment, did a lot of drilling, boring to determine what the bedrock was under the reservoir, particularly around the intake structure itself. The initial design was to actually construct a new intake structure, a 140-foot tall intake structure. And these are some of the locations, the little squares that you can see. See if my mouse will show you. Little squares out here by the existing intake structure, and then along the alignment of the proposed microtunnel. So we did a lot of boring to see what the components of the rock were. Unfortunately, the rock was very poor quality, from fair to poor to very poor, which caused us to have to design a massive foundation to be able to accommodate that. So again, the feasibility study, as I mentioned, the bathymetric survey, we did a seismic evaluations. We looked at various intake alternatives, about 10 initially, and 4 different guard gate alternatives. Went through a pretty rigorous decision analysis before we came up with the preferred alternative. So I'll briefly go through these initial alternatives. The first 3 were all 140-foot tall structures with, as I said, as I mentioned, very massive foundations to accommodate because of the poor rock quality. They were a concrete structure, stainless steel structure, and carbon steel structure, all breaking the surface of the reservoir. And then there was an alternative 4, this inclined intake. We looked at that as well. Looked at 3 others, shorter versions of the earlier ones, steel, 2 different steel options and a concrete option. And then another alternative 7, actually was alternative 10 when you consider all the A's and B's, was the one that we actually kind of leaned toward, was a smaller modification of the existing intake structure with some flexibility for the future as well. And the guard gate options, we looked at 4 different options there. 2 of them were rehabilitation of the existing guard gates with some isolation. One was an isolation of the 144-inch, which is 12-foot intake tunnel, and the other one was isolation of the penstock, which is a very dangerous dive. It was called a penetration dive that cost a lot of money and it was dangerous, so not very favorable. The other 2 options were replacement, or excuse me, new valves, valves upstream of the guard gates or downstream of the guard gates. Those also were going to be a challenge, but we did look at all of those. We migrated to some other design options, looking at some modifications in the intake structure and adding the microtunnel that Tom mentioned. And initially, when we were talking about adding a microtunnel, it was a shorter tunnel, I think 300 or 400 feet, Jeff, if I'm not mistaken. And it had a 140-foot vertical shaft as part of it that would enable the water to come in from the reservoir and then drop down and be intercepted or intercept the existing intake penstocks, which are right here in this dashed area. So that was the concept behind both of these different intake structure modifications on both. We've since modified that slightly to get to where we currently are. And our current design really is not much modification at all to the existing intake, which is good. It's simply really cutting a beam of the existing intake in the reservoir right here, and being able to insert a bulkhead that would give us some isolation of the existing 12-foot diameter tunnel, and that would allow us to work on the guard gates. Now, in order to keep water flowing, there are two options that we could do. We could do bypass pumping. Our engineers looked at that and our contractor looked at that, and we've determined that the cost of that is around $15 to $20 million just to bypass pump for the time period that we would need. We didn't like that idea. Our board didn't like that idea. We felt like that was throwing money away, because at the end of the construction period, you've spent $15 or $20 million and you really don't have anything. So our designers looked at another option. What if we put in this micro tunnel? It's going to cost more than bypass pumping, but it gives you something for the future. It gives you another elevation to take water from. It gives you that redundancy to be able to supply water downstream. It also provides water during construction. Once we have the micro tunnel in place, now we can isolate the guard gates and work on the guard gates and not have any impact to the deliveries downstream. That's where we landed with that. Here's an overview of that, the new design. It's this micro tunnel connecting into the existing penstocks right there, going parallel about 800 feet into the reservoir. I'll show you some artist renditions of what that looks like coming out into the reservoir there in just a moment. So compared to what we initially started with, results of the feasibility study to where we are now, the feasibility study suggested we'd have valves and a pretty robust intake modification, actually a completely new intake. Now we're just going to use the current intake and just install a bulkhead to give us that isolation. We were going to look at rehabilitation or new valves for the guard gate improvements. Now it's going to be rehabilitation in the guard gate chamber. We didn't look at a bypass piping or a micro tunnel in the initial, but now, as mentioned, 68-inch micro tunnel, 800 foot long. We had the 140-foot deep shaft initially. Now that's down to about a 72-foot vault, rather. A lot easier to construct and a lot more workable for us. All of these were informed by the bathymetry that we did in the seismic investigation, the geotechnical borings, and the robust decision analysis. Speaking of that decision analysis, it's called the Kepner-Trigo analysis. We identified some areas that we wanted to focus on: reliability, redundancy, cost, risk management, equipment flexibility, access and maintenance, future expandability, quagga mussel issues, water quality issues, and longevity, and assigned them different weights. And went through this exercise as staff. We involved our board of directors as well as our engineer, and we all came to the same decision where we were headed down this. So the solution is, I mentioned, the 68-inch bypass pipe and vault, which gives us the redundancy that we look for, as well as it's designed for seismic. So we'll be able to isolate the existing intake, as I mentioned, that allows us to do the rehabilitation of the guard gates and address that aging infrastructure issue. Here's another example of the cross section of the dam, and this is the modifications to the intake tower, the refurbishment of the guard gates, where some parts will be replaced, some will be just inspected, but we're going to go through everything to make sure that everything's ready to go for another 80 or 100 years. And this micro tunnel and vault. So here's a rendition of what it might look like exiting into the reservoir, the micro tunnel that we're looking kind of southeast. I believe that is on US 189. I'll show you a couple other views of this. If you're in the reservoir, looking a little bit south there, I suppose that is. And then here, looking a little bit more southwest, you can see how it's elevated. It's higher elevation, and it goes through the left abutment. As you're looking downstream, it doesn't go through the embankment of the dam, just the rock on the left side. These are There are not going to be people in the bottom of the reservoir just conversing, but it does show you kind of the size of things. That's supposed to be a 6-foot man, and that shows you how it comes out of the mountainside there. We have a trash rack there to prevent anything going into the pipeline. And again, this is all coated with what's called foul release coating to address the concern about quagga mussel. Currently, no quagga mussels in Deer Creek Reservoir, knock on wood, but there was some concern a number of years ago, and so we want to just be prepared if that happens. So again, microtunnel bypass gives us redundancy for the future, allows us to address water quality issues if we need to. We talked about aquatic invasive species and scheduling, and we have been coordinating with just about every agency we can think of. Deer Creek State Park obviously is impacted by our project. Division of Wildlife, Division of Water Resources, definitely, of course. We've talked to Fish and Wildlife Service at the federal level. We're intimately working with Bureau of Reclamation on this project as well. So we've tried to be inclusive in that regard. We're also reaching out to the public. We're in the middle of an environmental assessment right now. The Bureau of Reclamation is taking the lead on that. There's not a requirement that we receive public input for that, but my board wants us to do that. And obviously that's wise to do. So we're identifying groups of users and adjacent cities and towns and, boaters and just everyone can think of that. The list is probably 50 different, different entities that we're looking at to include in that. I don't think I'll go into any further detail on the bypass plan or profile, but there it is, kind of showing the slope as it comes from the reservoir down to connect to the intake end stocks. There's kind of a view of where, as you're coming along the highway there, you might see it's not going to stick out of the ground. Actually, the upstream or the uphill side is going to be pretty flush there. So in case there's an avalanche, it will just flow over the top of that vault and it won't cause a problem. But it's kind of where it would be located in relation to the power plant. Here's a rendition of the vault. As you can picture, on this left side, this is where the bypass pipeline is coming in, and then it bifurcates and then goes down and joins to the 2 existing end stocks. This vault will have access, obviously, at the top for maintenance and our technicians to be able to access that. There also will be a removable roof, so that in the future, if we need to take out a big component such as a valve, we can do that. We don't have to destroy anything or try and go out through the end stock tunnel, which would not be good. We talked about intake modifications, fairly simple compared to what the design was earlier. Just cut a beam, insert a bulkhead, and then put a new beam back in there. This is what that bulkhead might look like. You can imagine a 12-foot in diameter. In fact, one of them is going to be even larger than that. Jeff or Sam, 14 foot or 16 feet in diameter. So pretty huge bulkhead that we're talking about. And we'll have redundant bulkheads to protect personnel that are working. So safety is an issue, obviously. All this work that's done in the wet will be from barges. You'll see barges on Deer Creek Reservoir for months at a time. We're going to have turbidity curtains involved so that we protect water quality. Obviously, you probably know that the majority of the water that we deliver, Provo River Water Users Association delivers, goes for water treatment for drinking water. So our users are very concerned about that, so we will definitely maintain water quality. Our delivery team, AE2S is our design engineer. We are operating with a CMGC, a construction manager, general contractor situation with Granite Construction. It's been great to have them on board as we go through this design effort. And then, as I mentioned, we work very closely with the Bureau of Reclamation because this is a Bureau of Reclamation team. The schedule, we're in the middle of design right now. As Tom mentioned, materials procurement is we want to start that fairly soon, and we need funding to be able to do that. We keep watching the price of materials go up and up every day. And I echo what Randy said about fuel. From our 30% cost estimate to our 60% cost estimate, probably the majority of the increase was due to fuel costs, what our contractor was telling us. As you see, this schedule shows that we'll complete this project in second quarter of 2025 if all goes as planned. Oh yes, I mentioned Deer Creek State Park before. The main park and ramp will not be impacted at all, but if you're familiar with Deer Creek State Park, there's a sailboat beach. It's not an improved ramp it's not a concrete ramp, but it's a dirt ramp. Our contractor will take that over for the 3 years of this project. And so there will be no public access there. We will put it back in better than it was before we started. So that will be the situation there. We're coordinating with Deer Creek State Park so that they're. And you know about the funding. Tom mentioned that we're looking at other options, possible your reclamation grant, other state agencies, and everything we can think of. And if you have an idea, we'll gladly hear it. As he showed you, there's an $11 million gap between what we've outlined and what we've identified and what we need. Just to mention about the costs, the $100 million is our projection based on the cost estimates that we received at 60% and what our engineer and design or contractor expect to see at 100%. So we're trying to be proactive and coming to you saying that we expect it to be $100 million, but while we're going through this process, we are still trying to identify cost savings measures along the way, and we will continue to do that. So as we watch inflation impact us and cost of materials impact us, we're still trying to not cut corners, but just be more efficient in what we're doing so that we have the best value. And that's our presentation.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate the detail and explanation, helping us to better understand the scope and magnitude of the project. Obviously, it is a big project and a lot of moving parts. And kudos to those that are willing to work underwater. We'll go ahead and turn to the board for any questions, comments regarding the project.
I'd just like to mention that I've met with these gentlemen 2 or 3 times, and it's been a real pleasure sitting down and working with them. They're a conscientious group of men concerned about their project and concerned about their facility. And I have a little personal interest in this whole thing too, because when that project was first being proposed and people getting on board and so forth, my grandfather was one of those that was on the front lines pushing to get this project done. So I'd like to keep the legacy going just a bit and see that this project gets completed, because well, it's really important for a lot of people. So we'll look forward to addressing this again next month, but thank you, gentlemen, for coming and explaining your project.
Any other comment? Go ahead, Charles.
Just a couple of questions. One is, and it's just me, but I'm having trouble understanding what the concept of the guard gate is. What function does that serve? And is that an operational tool or a safety tool or what?
It's an operational tool. I'll let Jeff Budge address that.
Yeah, the guard gates are basically the valves that shut off the flow of water through the outlet works. And so if we need to do any maintenance or any activities downstream with the power turbines or the bypass valves around the turbines, we need to be able to shut the reservoir flow off. They're also in part an emergency stop. We're designed to, if something were to fail, a pipe were to rupture downstream of those gates, we can remotely activate those valves and shut them down without putting an individual at risk to go into the power plant and shut those valves down. So they play a dual purpose role in there. And originally they were the only way to get water to stop and start out of the dam.
Okay, thank you. My additional question is the coating on the metal or whatever, is that the latest technology of dealing with quagga mussels and zebra mussels?
And yes, as Keith mentioned, the FRC foul resistant coating.
Excuse me, would you just introduce yourself so we can get it on the record?
Of course, Sam Thankhauser.
Okay, thank you.
The FRC coating has been tested for a couple of decades now by the Bureau of Reclamation. We've been working closely with the Bureau to determine the best solution to mitigate quagga mussel infestation and settlement on this infrastructure. And they've used it at the facility Parker Dam, which is highly infested with mussels, and performed an experiment. And it's still ongoing and over several years, and there still has been no attachment onto the FRC coated trash racks. So very successful, again, Bureau of Reclamation led, working very closely with them on this.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I think Keith, in the earlier part of your presentation was indicated that Provo River water users and Deer Creek Reservoir supply water to approximately 1.5 million people. I would dare say that, and maybe I'm sticking my neck out here, but probably the majority of those people don't understand and realize the significance of that facility. And all they have to do is turn their tap on and the water is there. Don't understand everything that goes on behind the scenes to get that water, that potable water, to them. So thank you. Let's look. We'll turn to the public. Are there any public comments, or were there any public comments received? Randy has indicated there have been no public comments received. So with that, we are prepared to entertain a motion. Excuse me.
This is Randy Crozier. Can I just ask a question of Keith, or just a comment?
Yes, go ahead.
I don't know if there's a possibility, but with your micro tunnel, I don't know if by management with Jordanelle in central Utah, if you might possibly be able, I hate to say it, but with the drought scenarios, if you were able to manage those reservoirs in a way to be able to do that micro tunnel intake dry rather than having to do it with divers. I don't know if that's a possibility. I'm sure you've looked at it. I just wondered if you have any comments to that.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. We did look at that. In fact, that was a recommendation that came out of a preliminary look into the feasibility of this project. But as we looked at it further and AE2S looked into it, first of all, I guess I should back up a little bit and say that was never something that my board of directors embraced. Just the thought of lowering our reservoir down to a mud puddle and then hoping and praying that it would fill back up again. That's kind of scary for water managers, scary for those who rely on Deer Creek Reservoir water supply. So that was a big concern. But yes, we did look at it and we determined that we could do this. The technology is available to do it in the wet. It happens, in fact, all over the country, all over the world. Individuals are qualified to do this, and it's been fun getting to know them. Those that do this work, the divers, the contractors that do this type of work, really fun getting to know them and understand the methods.
Oh, I understand and appreciate that, Keith. I just thought maybe with Jordanelle and the current situations or what might come to us, that it might allow to hold that water higher upstream and certainly not dump or lose that water that you have to have. If the opportunity arises, if this drought continues to short us for water, it may be something that would allow you to do it in in the dry is all my thoughts were, Keith.
Yeah, Randy, let me just make a comment to that. This is Jeff Budge, and we are coordinating with Central Utah. We are meeting with them on a monthly basis to figure out the best way to manage the reservoir levels, and where we can most expeditiously, we're looking at working at lower levels so that the divers can spend more time and be more effective in their dives, and so that we can reach the landing area from the barges more efficiently. So we are trying to coordinate with them. But like Keith said, we do end up with water quality concerns and issues the lower we let the reservoir go, and it then increases the cost for water treatment downstream. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but we are entertaining every option that we can to minimize the cost and to do it safely for all concerned. And we appreciate the question. And that question actually came up during this hazards analysis that we've been dealing with Reclamation on this week. And so we continue to have those questions and continue to look into things as they come up.
Well, I appreciate that, Jeff. And I mean, you certainly have my support for this project. And I just feel that it's our responsibility as a board to just assure the public as well as us that no rock goes unturned to try to make the funds available go as far as possible. And I know that you guys will do a great job. And I mean, it's a challenging project. And as you mentioned, the less depth that you have to deal with, the less pressure on those divers, and the ability to work, like you say, longer makes a difference. So anyway, just hope that everybody works together to the best of everyone's ability and can bring this project together for the least amount of cost for everyone.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you, Randy. Any other questions or comments from board members? There's been some sidebar discussion occurring up here as to whether or not there is a need. This is a request for reauthorization, not a request for committal of funds. That'll come back at the next board meeting. And so is there a need for a motion for reauthorization?
The amounts are different.
Okay. So we will go ahead with a motion, and you've seen the staff recommendations. Again, are there any other questions or comments from the board or public? Seeing none, we're ready for a motion then.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I move the board authorize 65% of the project cost up to $65 million, and that the bonded indebtedness be returned at 1% interest over 35 years with annual payments of approximately $1,620,000 the first 5 years and about $2,420,000 the remaining 30 years, including reserves.
I'd second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Randy. We appreciate that. So there is a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and call for the question. And as before, I'll ask Candace if she will go ahead and do a roll call vote so that we can make sure that we get the vote of those participating with us virtually.
Juliet Tenner. Aye. Blaine Ipson.
Aye.
Norm Johnson.
Aye.
Wayne Anderson.
Aye.
Charles Holmgren.
Aye.
Randy Crozier.
Aye.
And Jim Lemon.
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you to the Provo River Water Users Association, and good luck on the project, and hopefully the costs won't go through the roof. The next three or the next projects, there's three of them we will consider together. That's RE 448 Centerville City, which is a withdrawal. RE 451 Salem City, which is a withdrawal. And RL 584 Monroe City, which is also a withdrawal. And so we'll entertain a motion for considering all of those three withdrawals together.
Mr. Chairman, this is Blaine. I would like to make a motion that the three different projects, RE 448 for Centerfield City, RE 451 for Salem City, and RL 584, which is for Monroe City, be withdrawn for further consideration by the board.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that motion. This is Norman.
Second by Norm Johnson. We'll go ahead and call for a question on that motion, and I'll ask Candace to go ahead and do a roll call vote on those.
Right. Juliet Tennard. Aye. Blaine Ibsen.
Aye.
Norman Johnson.
Aye.
Wayne Anderson.
Aye.
Charles Holmgren.
Aye.
Randy Crozier.
Aye.
And Jim Lemon.
Aye.
Before we ask, or I'll declare that the motion passed, were there any public comments on any of those three? Indications are there were no public comments, so we'll rule that the motion passes. And those three applications have been withdrawn from further consideration. The final item on the agenda is just an item of note to indicate that there is a new application, RE 458, City of South Salt Lake. And we'll just note that that application has been received and will be considered at a future meeting. So with that, we will turn time to Josh Zimmerman to give us an update on the Transparent Water Billing Grant Program.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairperson, members of the board. To jog your memory, we met in September.
Showing. Sorry, just one sec. For some reason, not.
If it doesn't go without it.
I got it. Just has to share. There we go.
So we met in September, and it was a little bit of a unique meeting because we did a pre-approval for $2 million. And I'm here today to give you an update. So, and tell you the progress what we've made, a little bit on the efforts that we put in so far, and what we've learned, and how those funds have been used, and what's gone out the door. And I have some information regarding that. And at the end, if you want to give feedback or direction and how we continue forward, get the opportunity to do that. I'll get started. I have a slideshow, but of course, you guys just interrupt me whenever you want to stop and talk and clarify. I'm happy to share everything I can. All right, so to kick this off, we needed to get an online application up and running so that people could apply, and we got the information that we needed up front, and we have that up and running. Our application is 2 pages. So we boiled it down to as little as we could have and still get what we needed. We also require a proposal to be submitted with that application. On our webpage, we also have a frequently asked questions portion where folks can get there in a few clicks and get a lot of questions answered up front. It also has my contact information on there, and they can call or email me directly. well, getting the word out on this is very important so that we get people to come to apply in cities that, or other entities that do billing are aware of it, and they can choose to apply and start the process of us working together. Every opportunity we have conferences, we take that opportunity to do outreach. We do it through partnerships at the conservation districts. They have a good idea of the folks they supply water to and who might be the most in need or want to participate in a process like this, the most motivated entities. We did a blast to the League of Cities and Towns to get our information out to as many people as possible with the click of a button through email. And then the other way that the information is getting out is the service providers, the folks that are contracted to do this, reach out to cities on their own as well. So 5 applications have been approved. Syracuse, Clinton, West Point, Grand County Water and Sewer, and Ivan City is almost through the process. If you look at the slides, you'll see Davis Weber Canal Company is on there as well, and they are a co-applicant, but they don't have any less work or in all the information that they have to organize their database so that it can be integrated is the same as the other companies. So I want to make sure that we acknowledge them as a actively engaged partner in these projects as well. Getting the secondary users that they have on board is fantastic. All right, so in the big picture, started out with $2 million that was pre-approved, and out the door is $341,280. And that's a good sum of money, but what's the board pre-approving, or how far is that going? So did a little bit of digging into the applications, and I totaled out all the endpoints, or if you want to look at it as a house that gets water delivered to it, if that's a better word. And just by fast math, the amount that this would be costing the state would be $11.50 for what the board is granting, and the other partners, it would be about $1.70 per connection. And I think that's pretty good bang for the buck. That's not 1 year either. That's the 3 years that we're going forward. So I think it's just a different way of seeing how beneficial this money can be, and to get at least 3 years of past data for the baseline and 3 years of project data moving forward. I think we're well set up to get some really good information that is going to provide a lot of value to decision makers in the state. So for continuing efforts, we want to facilitate the application process and provide feedback on the applications and the proposals. This is the art of having hoops that people need to jump through, but not too many, and not hoops that can't be jumped through, right? We want to get this money out, and we're here to facilitate it and help them through the process. And we don't want to impede progress or be seen as a stopping point at all. As we move forward, we'll track progress of the existing grants, and we'll be able to report back on that with some deliverables on tactics and water saved. And then we need to continue to be creative in letting anyone know that these grants are available and how to apply. So a few things that we've learned. One thing I think we can all appreciate is that cities, they have their own needs on getting their funding. So if they have to go in front of a board or a process to get approved to apply for this grant, that takes time on their end. So once you are approved and you receive the grant, that's when the people that organize the database start compiling in that and organizing it so it can be integrated into the next system. And they don't necessarily start doing that until they get the funding, because it takes money and resources, and they want that grant money to start. So it's not as easy as having a database that's well organized and then just saying, hey, here we go. It does take effort and to get that ready to go to the next stage. The other exciting part of what we're learning is the partners are engaged, they have expertise with their systems, and they are eager to conserve. There's a need for this, especially right now with the conditions that we have, and our partners are doing their best to get the information into the public's hands to help them make choices as fast as we can. So that's the gist of the update. Our next update, if we did it in 6 months, it'd be a similar time frame as this. It's also be at the end of the water year, and I haven't had any questions yet, so I'll save that. But if there's anything you want me to expand on or have more questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Any questions from the board? I have a couple. Just as you've gone through this process, Josh, in the last slide before this one kind of answered part of that question, but as you've started into the process, the number of applications, is that what was anticipated, or would there have been more? Don't know how to answer or to ask that question specifically, but just kind of, would you have expected more applications for the grant money to be received at this time frame?
I'm really sure, yes. Our cost share of 85 up to 85%. That's aggressive, right? And we did that because we had intentions, or we were wanting to create a situation where it would
for
go
them
up
to,
fast.
yeah. Is there a cap on the amount that they can submit for a grant request?
No.
Okay, so there's no limit on that. And right now, there's been 5 that have been approved for 341,000. So each one of these entities are kind of going out and developing their own database and developing their own system customized to their specific needs, as opposed to a bigger database or a program that could be developed that they could adapt to their system.
Great question. So these cities are hiring or contracting with providers that take their databases in the Davis County systems. They have their culinary boundaries, and that's what they deliver water is potable water, and then or they integrate their secondary with their potable water, and they take those 2 databases and combine them, and then they create one information source for a portal for users to log on to and see their information with one source. So you're not getting a potable source and a secondary source.
Okay, so they're trying to merge the 2 together, and you just have to look at one.
And
Or
I'll continue
go
on
one site and see the results of both programs.
and that's exciting. And the amount of effort and computer programming and what goes into gathering that data and then having it be able to reach those customers efficiently is great, right? And through doing that, when they to do that quickly, it's an exciting project in that area. And with a portal, there's other portals that exist in the state, and the usership on portals isn't as high as we'd like it to be. And whether it's 15% or somewhere in that area. But one of the neat things about when we enter into this pilot project together is we can ask questions of things like, what information did we send out on what date, and what impact did that have on the amount of people that logged into the portal that day or the next week or after that billing cycle? And it's exciting because that information can be transferred or used on other systems that have portals, and we can expand the amount of conservation we have, not just to those users, but to systems that have portals in general.
Okay, thank you. I'd venture to guess that as the water restrictions become more apparent, that we as the citizens are going to be more interested in looking at the impact that it has on us, and looking at those portals to see how we've been using our water and such. So thank you.
One more to touch on that. Sorry to.
Okay, that's okay. Go ahead.
But to get through the process, if we have them take their information, their volume of water that they're billed on, and they convert that back into gallons, right? And that makes it more meaningful to the person that's entering the portal, opening up the envelope, seeing the bill when they can convert it to gallons. And in that effort is 100% geared towards being understandable and having an impact.
How many gallons of water did I use as opposed to how many acre feet of water did I use?
And who can rattle off acre feet?
It doesn't mean anything. So, okay, thank you. There's no other questions. Thank you for your report. Look forward to updates in the future to see how things are going.
Me too. Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is Bear River Development Report. Marissa.
Do you want me to not make it awkward and stand here? I was really disappointed when Keith Denos left. I walked out for a second to say goodbye, and he said, "I saw you were on the agenda after me. I decided to get out of there." I just was going to talk about what a passionate basketball fan he is of, that was all I was going to say, something like that. Oh, okay, it's ready. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, just an update on the right-of-way acquisition of Bear River Development. We have closed on 2 more parcels or acquisitions. This one is a house that we actually have been under contract with for about 1.5 years. We gave them the option to actually go ahead and sell on the market because the appraised value was from 2 years ago. And they chose to just go ahead and follow through with the contract on us, with us. And so that is the one property we closed on as of late. And then we closed on this property. And I should have put a map in. I apologize. We've got an area where for some of you that are familiar, the Woodiette Cherry Farms up there off Highway 89, and there's also a peach farm. This is the west end of these properties. This property is right next to those. And so what we've bought is just a strip. So you can see the purchase size is under 1/2 acre for $17,900. That's a lot more palatable cost than one that has structures and homes on them. And so those are the 2. No actions are needed. This is part of the $5 million that was committed by the board earlier. So funds spent to date are $3.35+ million. Any questions?
Any questions of Marissa? Thank you for that update.
Not even about Keith's passionate and okay. Thank you.
Which basketball team is he passionate for? Okay. Okay, next agenda item is the the Lake Powell Pipeline Report. And Eric, we'll turn the time to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Appreciate the time to be here and give you a little update. Probably sound like a broken record sometimes, but here we go. Just kind of go over the key efforts that have been going on to give a brief update on each of them. Reclamation, the Bureau of Reclamation continues working on the supplemental draft EIS. As you know, we've said it the last couple of times with the drought, it's kind of taken a lot of energy and resources that otherwise would have been on this, but things are continuing on at just a little slower pace than we would hoped and expected. But it makes sense with the way things are. And as part of that, as a result, the Colorado River modeling, there's a bigger focus on that right now to make sure that that's accurate and including the information that it needs to be in there, so that we're looking at the real waters and what's available for the states, and particularly what we'll have available for Utah and how it ties into this project. Public education and outreach is continually ongoing. Down in that area, they've put a major emphasis recently on conservation efforts. You know, the cities are working on ordinances and different things to put in place to emphasize that and to do it whatever they can right now while there's the urgency and the need with the drought. And the hope is that those will continue to, you know, if and when we get out of the drought, those efforts will be in place and continue to decrease the demands or the use by people. But yeah, a lot of public education on that and what's going forward and options that are available. On the water right change application, we are still waiting for a decision or an order from the state engineer on that. So that's the update we have for that, is still pending a decision from the state engineer.
Excuse me for interrupting. Is there any indication as to time frame when they are looking to have a decision on that, or?
Have never given any time commitment of or when they expect to. There's guesses and rumblings and stuff, but I won't speculate here. So. And then the potential federal administration changes. We've mentioned these before. One with the potential changes to the waters of the United States and the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument boundaries. From what we're looking at, we don't think either of those will have impacts on what we're looking at, because it's looking at going back to the rules that were in place for those before the change with the previous administration. So it's, you know, the original design kind of had those concepts already in place, and what those would be changing to. Basin states coordination is ongoing with the drought. There's a lot of time and focus, and they've had recent meetings on the DROA, which is related to the Drought Response Operation Act agreement. Okay. So that's kind of wrapping up. So the hope is that some of the time and effort that's been focused on that, we'll be able to move on to some other things that require the coordination of all those basin states, both the upper and the lower basins. Additional permitting efforts. There's a Section 14 agreement with the Bureau of Reclamation. That's one that now can get a little more focus with the DROA stuff kind of wrapping up. And then some of these other ones will probably be a little longer down the line, waiting for, you know, with some further along design and decisions on the supplemental draft EIS, which would include the Bureau of Land Management preparing a historic properties and treatment plan. The Army Corps of Engineers has a 404 permit, and the Utah has a 401 certification for the stream alterations, and those need to be farther along in the design for those to be finalized. And then Fish and Wildlife Service biological opinion, that's pretty much wrapped up, but just as the SDEIS may have some impacts on that. I forgot to mention, so it wasn't the broken record. I did shuffle some of those items around from last meeting's agenda. See if you can catch that. The forward planning, again, no dates have been set, because with the focus on the drought and things, there's not been a date set for when the SDEIS will be anticipated to be completed. But there's the timeline of what will happen: SDEIS, and then the final which will lead to a record of decision. Then we'll get into the design and financing issues, and then finally into construction. As far as contracts, the consultant we have working with us, Stantec, that contract is good through the end of this year. The funds that we're provided with the most recent amendment. A silver lining of the things slowing down a little bit is that contract has been being spent a little slower than expected. So it'll get stretched out a little, be able to stretch a little further. The Bureau of Reclamation task order and the BLM cost recovery agreement, those are nothing needed at this time for either of those. The funds are there when they need them for those items. And that's all I had to present right now, unless there are any questions.
Thank you, Eric. Any questions from the board?
This is Norman. What is the code section under which this operates for each state of Utah?
The LPP Act. Do you remember the?
You can send it out. I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, we can track it down and get it out. We can email it out to you. Yeah, I don't remember either.
Mr.
Okay,
Chairman, this is Randy.
Go ahead.
One of the things that's in that act is that the board's supposed to have direct oversight on this. So the more information we receive, the better.
Yeah, and then that's our hope is.
Good point. Thank you for bringing that up, bring that back to our attention. So that, I think that, Eric, that's part of your objective, is to keep us informed and as to what's going on.
So I guess with that, if there's anything as the meeting or these meetings get closer, if there's things you want me to focus on or highlight or be able to give to you, just let me know and I'd be happy to do so.
Okay.
7328-101.
So 73-28-101.
Okay, that's answer to Norm's question as to what is the statutory authority.
That's the Lake Powell Pipeline Development Act.
Would you read that again?
Joel's got better eyes than me. 73-28-101.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Very much.
Oh, I failed to ask if there were any public comments on those last two agenda items. Were there any? Okay, let the record show that there were no public comments received on the last two agenda items. So we'll go ahead and now turn the time for the director's report to Candace, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So as you all know, and Jordan did a great job of going over our water supply, so I'm not going to go over that in detail, but Utah continues to be in a widespread and historic drought, with 100% of the state experiencing drought conditions and over 40% in the extreme category. To this end, and Utah has been in drought for the last 8 of the 10 years. And Governor Cox issued a drought emergency declaration on April 21st. He happened to do it when I was in Costa Rica, so I wasn't available for all the bad news that was shared. But that's it just showcases the urgency and the issues that we're facing as a state. Great Salt Lake typically drops a little over 2 feet each summer, and with the current elevation of 4191.1, this would mean that the lake would hit a new historic low potentially this year. So, and there's a lot of eyes on that. As Eric described, on the Colorado River, there's been a significant amount of efforts going into a number of very important matters. In March of 2022, Lake Powell dropped below that 3525, like we talked about at our last board meeting. And it also raised the concerns of water levels could potentially drop below the elevation of 3490, which is the kind of minimum elevation to continue to make power. And so there's been a substantial amount of efforts going in to try to shore up and keep Lake Powell above that. For example, today, Flaming Gorge Reservoir is approximately 80% of capacity, and Lake Powell sits at about 24%. Uh, the 2022 drought response operations plan was finalized and authorized to release 500,000 acre feet from Flaming Gorge, as well as possible follow-up releases from Blue Mesa Reservoir in Colorado and Navajo Reservoir in New Mexico, depending on the available release volumes. And so these releases from Flaming Gorge are anticipated to begin on May 1st, 2022, and run through April 30th, 2023. So this is a coordinated release in part to the Drought Response Operations Agreement that Eric mentioned, and it is an element of that drought contingency plan that was passed by Congress in 2019 and signed into law. And so really just trying to shore up, Lake Powell from hitting those critical elevations. In addition to that 500,000 acre feet coming out of Flaming Gorge, there was a decision that has come from the Department of Interior to reduce the amount of water being released from Lake Powell as well. So not only are we getting more into Flaming Gorge, the Secretary has reduced the amount of water leaving Lake Powell from 7.48 million acre feet to 7. So that extra 480,000 will be in Lake Powell to try to shore up from that. And these two efforts alone has brought the probability of Lake Powell hitting 3490 down to about 3%, where it was almost 20 to 30% previously. So these efforts are beneficial, and it just showcases all the issues that are going on. And it's taken a significant amount of time. I'm looking at Wendy because she's been on more DROA calls than she probably cares to let anyone know about. But we really appreciate her and all the other staff who've worked on these issues. We did have, as far as the Bear River Commission, we did have a Bear River Commission meeting a couple of weeks ago. At that commission meeting, Blair Francis, who is our upper Bear River Commissioner, has resigned, and he is stepping down from the commission after how many years, Charles? Was it 40 years? Like 42 years, if I remember in the resolution. Yeah, so he's been a long time commissioner. We are going to have a new commissioner in place, Norm Weston, so we'll put an item on the agenda for next month so you guys can approve that. And then a new alternate. And I had his name right off, but do you know who the alternate is, Charles? I can look it up.
No, Madam Director, I do not know.
Okay, well, I will tell you. Bart Argyle is being suggested as the new alternate for Upper Bear River Commission.
Sounds like a long-time family name from Upper Division.
Okay, well, sounds good. Well, we'll look forward to working with him as well. And then we already kind of gave you a secondary metering grants update in our briefing meeting, but just a reminder, we've had so far total applications of 15 applications come in, and the application period is open to May 15th. So we will have another agenda item on the June meeting with a full detailed report for you. And there's just two other items I wanted to bring your attention to. So the Division of Water Resources and a number of water districts and municipalities are having our second annual event called Flip Blitz, where we go in and remove a bunch of turf in various areas. Last year was fairly small. We did 4 park strips in the Salt Lake Valley, and now we're kind of branching out. We're covering areas in conjunction with the Water Conservancy districts in Utah County, Washington County, also in Price, and I believe they're doing some up in the Weber Basin area. It's estimated in that one day about 120 square feet of 1,000 square feet of grass will be removed. So pretty good chunk of grass will be removed, and the bulk of that is in Washington County. So that'll be May 19th. So any of you interested in your areas, we can put you in touch with the people that will be working on those areas. Mainly water resources will be in the Price area. And yeah, that'll be a fun event. A lot of things going on. One last thing, the governor did release the Utah's Coordinated Action Plan for Water, the second chapter in that series. So they've released the Introduction and Infrastructure chapter, and now the Vibrant Communities has been released. So we can send that out to the board for your guys' information as well. But that really just outlines conservation efforts, which should and are taking place and should continue to take place in the state and local governments, as well as businesses, neighborhoods, and households. So pretty good information in there, and provides some kind of action items for the state and state entities to do in the meantime. But that is my director's report. Happy to answer any questions.
A couple of questions regarding the secondary water metering program. You indicated, I think in an earlier meeting, that there was a group in northern Utah that was going together under a co-op type approach to purchase meters of up to 80,000. How is the timing on that coordinated with their grant application request? And is there going to be a problem if they get approval to go ahead and purchase those before their grants are approved? Does that create a problem?
I think that the goal is to go through the application period first and to find out how much grant funds that they will be getting, or if they will be getting whatever the board authorizes. But there is Weber Basin Water Conservancy District is spearheading an effort to kind of create some consortium of pressurized secondary water suppliers to kind of purchase those meters in bulk, and potentially even the installation. They may try to, like, as a group, hire a couple of entities to go in and do it, so they're not competing for services and all of those things. So I think their intention is, my understanding, to get all of their applications in this application period.
Okay.
So that will something we'll have to evaluate.
And then that was the next, leads up to the next question. That is, we had talked at one time about the possibility of needing some special board meetings, a special board meeting to consider those. Is that still the possibility, or will that grant approval program be incorporated into the next board meeting? Will it be done in time to do that?
So that's a great question. So our anticipation is that since the May 15th deadline is only a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks before our next board meeting, that we won't have time to go through all of those. So we have discussed pushing that to the August board meeting for your review. I have received some feedback that there's a lot of anxiety of trying to get this process done, and not done, but at least know what grants they have available, and start the process as soon as possible. So if it was the desire of the board to have a special board meeting earlier than August, I mean, we could do that. That's up to the prerogative of the board, though.
Well, I guess I would look at it from the standpoint of, I don't want to be the impediment of them being able to move forward. So if there's a need for this board to be able to meet in a different than what we already have scheduled, in order to accommodate that, I think from my perspective, my opinion is, I think we should be open to that to help the process move forward.
Yeah, and we can, as we go through the board report next board meeting in June, we'll have a better idea of how many applications and really a better idea of how long it's going to take us to process. Our plan is to do a streamlined feasibility report for each one, since they're not too different, right? They're all similar, that there will be a streamlined feasibility report. That being said, that will still take some time to compile. So I want us to have a better idea of how much effort that's going to take us to make sure we can meet whatever the timeline is. But we'll work to get that done as quickly as possible. Oh yeah, Shelley.
Mr. Chairman.
Hold on just a second, Randy. Shalane wants to address the group, and then I'll turn to you for your question.
Thank you, Chairman. Because I've been fielding a lot of calls too and having a lot of conversations, I think the key is that we're trying to be very communicative with applicants and making sure they understand, as long as they have an eligible project and we have funds available, even if it's August when funds are committed, if it's eligible and we have funds, they'll get 70%. That's what the law says, that they can get 70% for their project. So I'm just trying to make sure that people stay informed. And as you're aware, they're able to apply for loan funds in addition to grant funds. So that's part of what might make this a little bit longer process. If they were all just straight grants, I mean, we could put a list together, in probably a week and a half and get it back to you. And but there are several who would also like some help with their share of the non-grant portion. And so that's going to take a little bit longer to figure out, do some calculations to see if, we're sure they can afford, which shouldn't be too tough for most of these entities. But I will say, I think having Weber Basin Water Conservancy District as kind of the sponsor holding this consortium together, this group for a large order, I think they would be able to place an order knowing that grant funds were on the way and not necessarily have to pay out a whole lot up front to be able to get these meters in process. But as Candace said, we will try to work through this as quickly as possible. And if you guys want to meet, and normally we avoid board meetings in July just because, holidays, state government, all that sort of fun thing. But we will meet when we need to get this process done.
Thank you. Randy, go ahead.
Just a question for Candace and then a comment after. On that 500,000 acre feet being released from Flaming Gorge, is that over and above any and all inflow that's coming into the reservoir this year, or is that taken into account? Just wanted a clarification there.
That's a great question, Randy, and I can follow up. My understanding is that it is above and beyond what is currently scheduled in releases and outflows from Flaming Gorge. I can verify that, but that is my understanding that it is over and above. Okay,
that was just wanted to make sure. I just didn't know quite how that was, just how that was put together. So appreciate that. And then you're probably aware of that House Bill 168 that directed the state engineer to come up with rules. That is in the process, and she has scheduled meetings every other Monday from now through December. It seems to be a pretty heated topic. I don't know if the other board members are aware of that. It's the emergency, very controversial. I'll just leave it at that.
Yes, yeah, I can give a little bit more information if the board is interested.
Go ahead. I'd be interested in knowing what the issue is.
Sure, and I don't have it spelled out in front of me, but generally House Bill 168 is looking at the preferences on water rights in the state of emergency. So there is a chunk of code, and I can get you the reference that said that in the case of emergency, the state engineer can show preference to culinary, potable water, fire flows, and it seemed like there was one other category. In this last session, there was HB 168 that was passed that for 1 year repealed that section and set up a working group to kind of study the item for 1 year. And if the working group doesn't come back together with a a compromise something or other, then the section will be re-put in, and not only now will it include the drinking water and fire flows, but also power was included. There was an edit to it this last session to include power as well. So it is a very heated debate, as Randy mentioned, including really just a changing of how our prior appropriation doctrine in the case of a water emergency, that the state engineer could show preference.
Well, and it also allows the governor to make that declaration. And so I just think there's a lot of concern as to, putting that much power in that decision process. And and when they talk of fair compensation for those that they're taking water from, some say they're willing to pay that. And then when you get into the details, they're saying, well, we can't pay that kind of money. We won't pay true impacts. So I think it's going to be a very, very touchy. I was invited to be part of that group, and it's, anyway, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of it.
Okay, thank you for that, Randy, and thank you for that further clarification or explanation, Candace. Anything else? Okay, that concludes Candace's director's report. Are there any other items that, I don't know if I can ask that, if there are any other items that are not on the agenda that we can bring up and discuss? We can't, so. Okay, so we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. There's a little bit of hesitation there. I didn't know whether you wanted to stay or it's been moved. Or is there a second? Blaine seconds it. We won't call for a roll call vote. We'll just call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Jim, are you in favor? Jim, are you there?
Yes, I'm moving already.
Okay, you're muted. Okay. Thank you. We'll stand adjourned until our next regularly scheduled meeting, which is June 16th. So safe travels, and thank you for everyone's hard work.